almost exactly 1 month ago, I bought a camera that had been my dream camera for many years, the Leica M11-P. And since I know that many of you watching my channel also have an interest in this camera, a lot of you are Leica Q shooters, and maybe you're also wondering if making the jump to an M system is a good idea. And so I just wanted to share my experience and first impressions with you after using this beauty for a month. But in case you're new here, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Tobias. I'm a passionate photographer and camera enthusiast. I've been shooting for over 10 years, for whatever that's worth. And over the past 4 years or so, I've been mostly using my Leica Q2 for my photography, which eventually got me to a point where I wanted to dive even deeper into shooting Leica because I was so happy with my Leica Q2 experience overall. And so I wanted to buy a Leica M system. And well, I guess with this Leica M11-P now, I'm probably about as deep into Leica as you can be, at least if you're staying in the digital arena. Obviously, if you're getting into analog or film photography, that's a whole different chapter in and of itself. But for now, I'm staying digital, but who knows what the future might bring, right? Anyway, that is how I got here. But aside from just liking Leica cameras as a brand or liking my experience with the Leica Q2, there were obviously some more specific reasons why I wanted to get a Leica M camera. And so let's talk about those reasons for a second, and then I will tell you if this camera has met my expectations so far. And I think a lot of that stuff might be interesting to you folks who are maybe playing with the idea of also getting an M camera, whichever that may be, might be an M10, M240, whatever. This might be interesting to you as well. I will list my reasons in no particular order, but let's start by talking about the luxury element, if you like. Now, I do not care about luxury for luxury's sake. Not at all. Quite the opposite, actually. And I could not care less about impressing someone with my super fancy camera. That's not what this is about for me at all. For me, this is just about the quiet joy of owning and using something that has been made to an exceptionally high standard. This camera was built in Germany with precision and care, and it's made from high quality materials. Its design is as iconic as it is simple and elegant. The overall feel to this camera is just very subtle and very sophisticated. Now, all of that obviously has very little to do with how good your images turn out, at least on the surface. But things of that nature just matter to me, and I find it to be a huge joy to use this camera. And I was actually rather surprised how much of a step up this camera is in terms of how it feels to hold in the hand, to use, the weight it has to it, more on that later, compared to the Leica Q2, which is a high quality camera in and of itself. But this one is in a different league altogether. There's just something about a camera that is this well built and designed that immediately puts you in a different sort of mindset when you use it. It's truly inspiring, for lack of a better word. But it's not only that, of course, it's also a very capable and modern camera, because behind the looks, the M11-P houses a 60 megapixel sensor that is on par with every other high megapixel full frame sensor from any other brand out there. Probably because it's the exact same 60 megapixel sensor that you would get from Sony, but that is just a speculation on my end. So while this camera might look vintage inspired, it's capable of putting out image quality that is about as good as it gets for a full frame camera right now. And I think with this level of capability, it will probably be more than enough in the specs department for a number of years. Last but certainly not least, it is also just a very compact setup overall. Now, that is true for the camera body itself, but the body is not insanely small. There are probably other full-frame cameras out there of similar or even smaller proportions, like the Sony A7C line. But what sets the M system apart is the size of the lenses. Right now, I have a handful of Voigtlander lenses for this camera, but even though these are by far not the smallest lenses you could get for an M camera, they are tiny in comparison to full-frame lenses for other camera systems. Just look at this. This is a 50mm f1.2 Voigtlander lens, and this is a 55mm f1.8 lens by Zeiss for my Sony cameras. Now, the Zeiss lens is already fairly small and compact, but imagine how big that 50mm f1.2 G Master lens from Sony would be in comparison to this Voigtlander lens. It's a completely different story. But that sort of size advantage obviously comes at a cost, which surprisingly isn't necessarily the image quality. This lens actually performs exceptionally well, at least if you're okay with a good bit of vignetting, shooting wide open. But the obvious drawback here is just simply the fact that Leica M lenses do not have any kind of autofocusing motor. But that is also the whole point. Now, truth be told, not having autofocus is certainly not something that I was looking for outright. It's more that I was willing to accept the fact that a Leica M camera is not going to have autofocusing, and maybe that might turn out to be fun, but more so I just wanted to have the camera, I wanted to have a compact full frame setup like this, and I wanted to make it work, and so I just accepted the fact that it doesn't have autofocusing. And I was honestly fully prepared to be missing shots left and right for the first, I don't know how many weeks or month even. And I feared that I would eventually go back to something else if I would end up shooting stop down all of the time just in order to get my shots in focus. Because while stopping down for landscape photography or maybe even street photography is obviously well and good, I do like to open up the aperture every now and again, and I do like to get some bokeh in my shots. Not in the shots that you see on this channel. Most of my photography is just documenting my life with friends and family, and so you won't see any of that stuff on this YouTube channel. But again, what's the point of having a super compact f1.2 lens if you're shooting at f8 all of the time? And so this is where this camera actually really surprised me. You see, just a couple of weeks ago, before I got this camera, I would have probably told you that what I really wanted, hand on heart, is a Leica Q camera with an interchangeable lens mount. So having an EVF, having autofocusing lenses, but having a rangefinder style of body from Leica with weather sealing on all the rest of it. And while I still think that that's absolutely something that Leica should make, truth be told, right now all I want to have is this. And my hit rate, so the rate of shots that I got that were in focus with this camera, much to my own surprise, was not any lower than it is with a camera like the Sony a7 IV that I'm recording on right now. And that has autofocusing, and a very good autofocusing system at that. And so that's mostly down to two facts. Well, first being I don't shoot a lot of action. So most of the stuff that I'm shooting, even friends and family, even my 6-month-old baby, he doesn't really move around super fast. So I'm easily able to just take a bit of time and get my shots in focus. But also, using that manual focus with the rangefinder is incredibly intuitive. And so I was able to quickly get my shots in focus and get used to that whole process in no time. And it is insanely rewarding and fun, as much of a cliche as it is to say that, to use a rangefinder and manually focus your shots. It's a completely different story in my book to using an electronic viewfinder or just your live view and manually focusing with stuff like focus peaking. I mean, you can do that with the Leica Q, for example, but I barely ever did that because it's just not fun. Using the rangefinder, on the other hand, is huge fun. Now, for those of you who've never used a Leica M camera and don't know how the rangefinder works exactly, here's a short explanation. When you look through the rangefinder, you have a little square in the middle with what looks like 2 images, and your goal is to turn the focusing ring of your lens until those images overlap. And if you do, your center of frame is in focus. And once you've achieved that, you can just recompose and take the shot. It might look a bit complicated, but I promise you it's incredibly easy and intuitive to use. And also it makes pre-focusing your shots just super easy. So yeah, in my book, using this optical rangefinder, it's just a very fun and very rewarding process overall. But more than that, it also does have other advantages, like the fact that you obviously see your composition with the frame lines for whatever lens you put onto your camera, but you can also see what's going on around those frame lines. And so that allows you to know precisely the moment when, for example, somebody will enter your frame and your composition. And so that allows you to time your shots just right. And this just feels much more sophisticated, if you like, than, for example, if I were to do something similar with my Sony camera, I would probably just spray and pray as soon as a person enters a composition. And I would just hope that one of the shots that I take will work for me. Not with this guy. This is sort of the wall hack of the camera world, because again, you can just see when somebody will enter your composition and time your shots just right. I love it. And so I guess it's no wonder that Leica M cameras specifically have been so popular with street photographers in particular for so many years now. Other than that, there are also a few drawbacks that I have noticed. One is obviously the fact that this doesn't have IBIS. Now, truth be told, I've been shooting in daylight situations most of the time, because that is also one of the drawbacks of the rangefinder. Using the optical rangefinder in very low light conditions is not that easy. Maybe my eyesight isn't as great anymore, but yeah, sometimes it can really be hard to make out the two images and see where they overlap if you have very little light to work with and very little sort of contrast or edges where you can make out if those images overlap. And so shooting in the dark overall with the Leica for lack of IBIS and because of the optical rangefinder is not that easy. You can certainly make it work, you just have to take a bit more time perhaps, and you have to know its limitations, but it's not exactly the best camera for low light shooting. And I would say that for those types of situations, the rangefinder is actually the bigger drawback than not having IBIS, because with those compact lenses you can always open up the aperture, and this sensor is also capable of shooting at fairly high ISO with still acceptable levels of noise. And so for the most part you can sort of shoot handheld at 1/30th of a second and still get a decently sharp image if you can get the focus right. Another sort of drawback, if you like, that I am still getting used to is again the fact that this is a very expensive camera and sort of a luxury product. And so coming back to my point at the beginning, I do not necessarily feel comfortable all of the time when I'm using this out and about, just because of how expensive it is. And also it does feel kind of weird at times to have this out in the open on the table when I'm with friends and family. I know it's my own money, I can do with my money whatever I want, and still sometimes it almost feels like I have to justify my purchasing decision to other people, because yeah, again, it's just a good amount of money and this camera is probably worth more than some of my friends' cars, and that just feels weird at times. Aside from that, it is also a lot heavier than you would think, considering its size. Now, to me, that is not a drawback, it's actually almost a benefit, because it just feels super solid. But yeah, surprising amount of weight when you pick it up. And one quick thing that I wanted to mention as well that I do like is the fact that the M11-P has 256 GB of internal storage. It's a feature that I think every camera should offer. It just makes life a lot easier. But anyway, those are my first impressions of using this camera for 1 month, and I love it. I think it's a lovely camera, and I'm still probably also very much in the honeymoon phase with this camera. But I do know a couple of M shooters, both in real life, and I also do read the comments of lots of you who are M shooters, and from what I can tell, that honeymoon phase for most photographers seems to never end, because every Leica M shooter that I know in my personal life has stuck with Leica M. Maybe they have another camera with autofocusing that they use occasionally or for specific reasons, but for the most part, everyone I know that got into Leica M stays with Leica M and is just super happy with it. And so I guess I will see about that long term, and you can expect to see more videos about this camera and just the experience of using this camera on this channel. And so if that is interesting to you, feel free to subscribe, and if this video was interesting to you, feel free to give it a thumbs up. That's all I got for you today though. I hope this was interesting, and I'll see you in another one. Until then, take good care. Bye.